Hello, everybody, and welcome to Dream Space Live. Sporty Sprites, you're very welcome in for this very special event. My name is Michael. I'm one of the teachers on the Microsoft Ireland Dream Space team, and you're actually joining us live here from Stream Space in One Microsoft Place for this live lesson for this morning. We have a really exciting one for you. We're going to be looking at game design, combining it with our favorite sports. But before that, I'd like to introduce my co-host for today's live event, Corla. Hello, Corla.
Hi guys. So today I will be answering your questions in the Q&A and helping Michael out.
Yeah, exactly. So myself and Corla are going to be chatting through today's lesson, having a bit of a back and forth, but we're also going to be keeping an eye out on that Q&A or even that hashtag MSDreamSpace for any of your feedback, your questions, your comments, your concerns, anything along those lines. We're going to keep an eye out for it. So we have a really fun one for you, and we have a few shout outs to give in just a moment. But first and foremost, before we do anything, Corla, let's take a look at what we're going to be learning today. Okay?
Yeah.
So the first thing we're going to be looking at today, folks, is we are going to be discussing game design and what exactly that means. Okay, so you may have heard of game design before. It's the creation of games. It can be video games or real life games. And there's certain principles that come along with that, which we'll be exploring in just a moment. However, to be a game designer, what exactly does it mean? Well, essentially think of it as the big boss. You control every aspect of it. So you start thinking about, okay, how does my game work? Right? What kind of sprites are in there, the animations, okay? The velocity. These are all concepts we're going to be exploring today to see if we can bring our games to life, right? They're the foundation of all the favorite games we play and we know and we love. What's the next thing we're going to be looking at, Corla?
So we'll be looking at the sprite mechanics next. So basically we're going to explore the sprites, and sprites are the characters and the objects in the game. And we're going to understand how to create them and control them and their movements and use them to interact with the other elements of the game.
Excellent. So that's probably a cool one, I'd say, and I suppose a lot of people join us, they probably would have heard the term sprite before. Have you heard the term sprite before?
Yeah, I have. In different games that we've played, I remember in primary school.
Yeah, exactly. So you would have heard the term sprite, but sometimes in the context of game design, it can mean something a little bit different. So we're going to kind of drill down on that definition before we get stuck in. The next thing we're going to be looking at, folks, is we're going to get an introduction to block-based coding. Now, I'm sure a lot of you joining us has done some block-based coding before, whether that is with Scratch, MakeCode for Microbit, or even MakeCode Arcade, the platform we're going to be working with. But we're going to have a little bit of an introduction to it. Today's lesson is going to be fairly comprehensive. We have a good lot to cover. So if you have some experience with block-based coding before, you're going to be right up to speed with us. If you're brand new to it, don't worry. We're going to be bringing you step by step as well. You can always reach out to us with any questions, either in the Q&A or using hashtag MSDreamSpace as well. So we're going to keep an eye out for it. Corla, have you done anything with block-based coding before?
Yeah, I remember I've made some games, but I wouldn't say they'd be as good as the game we're going to make today.
Yeah, today's one is going to be pretty cool, right? Really excited for it. And this is going to lay a solid foundation for us folks as we kind of develop our game design skills or even future coding pathways we may take as well. So, Corla, what's the last thing we're going to be looking at?
So we're going to collaborate and use our critical thinking skills. So we'll enhance our problem-solving skills by working together and to overcome the game design challenges. And we'll also learn how to critically think and think critically to make our game both fun and functional.
Yeah, 100%. So a lot of the time when we work with MakeCode Arcade and a lot of the game designers I've spoken to in real life, yes, you have this fantastic idea and this vision for your game, and it's going to be super, super fun once it's actually working, right? But that functional piece is so important. So we're going to kind of bring you through like a scaffolding building of this game, and we're going to make sure that it works first and foremost, and then we're going to add all the fun on top of it. So we want to make sure it works first before we start adding the creative fun pieces. I think that's a fairly good kind of mindset to be in for today's lesson. So as promised, let's take a quick look at what exactly game design is. I'm sure you've heard of it before, or even the career path that you can take as a game designer. But what exactly is a game designer? Okay, you are creating brand new digital worlds. It's really, really cool, and it's such a broad term, being a game designer. Think of yourself as the master of a game. You control everything, whether that is the story, whether that is the in-game rules and physics, whether that's how characters actually interact with each other and play with each other, even the movement of how your character moves. You get to decide all of this as the game designer. And everything you experience in a game, whether there is famous ones, Minecraft, Mario, Sonic, and so on, game designers have thought of that and
Yeah.
built that into the game, right? Nothing is kind of filled in the blank. Everything is meticulously detailed by the game designer, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing today.
Yeah. So next bit, we're going to unleash our imagination. So in game design, your imagination brings the game to life, basically. You can create your characters, the storyline, and you're like being the author and the artist combined.
Yeah, so super cool. So I think a lot of time people think, and I'm sure some people joining us might think this as well, oh, game designer, that involves tech, that involves technology. You have to be great and amazing at coding. But it's not software engineering. Game design is something a little bit different. It does have aspects of coding and it does play a pivotal part. But game design is more like an art form, okay? And just as Corla said there, it is combining an author and an artist. So you have to create not only just the story, but you also have to create their characters and the worlds that our characters actually live within, which is pretty cool. It's a bit of a daunting task at the start, but it's so fulfilling when you have that final completed game.
And you get to play it yourself.
Exactly. When you actually get hands-on with your own game, it's a feeling like no other. Now, third of all, game design also has to, and game designers have to keep in mind the rules of their games, okay? So this has come down to something very, very specific, and this could be as specific as how the characters and players actually move in our game, how they interact with each other when they touch each other or overlap, what players can or can't do, and then you're also going to be thinking about, okay, how can my player win, and what challenges do they face? That's a big part of game design as well, having a difficulty within the game, so you actually have an incentive to play it. If games are too easy and there's no challenge and no difficulty, there's no goal to work towards, it's not really worth playing, I think. You know, it's hard to even classify it as a game sometimes if there's not something you're working towards. So we have to keep that in mind today, folks, as we are being our very own game designers. And last but not least, Corla, what does being a game designer mean?
So the last bit of being a game designer is using technology as your paintbrush. So game designers use software as tools to turn their games into reality, and it's crafting everything we see and hear in the game.
Exactly. So that's a really cool one. So if you think of a writer, they have a pen. If you think of a painter, they have a paintbrush. In game design, your canvas and your paintbrush is software, and it's computers, and it's technology, which is super cool and super interesting. Especially if you are interested in tech and so on. It actually allows you to be super creative. That's the big piece I want to kind of reaffirm today, folks, is that when you are a game designer, it's being techie, but it's also being super creative. So what we're going to be looking at now, folks, before we get stuck into MakeCode Arcade and building our very own game, is we're going to be looking at the 4 key pillars of game design. So these are the principles that all games have to include. I won't even say all good games include. I think all games,
they do,
right? It's hard to even classify a game being a game without these 4 principles underpinning it and being the pillars that we see. So the first one we have is having an objective and a goal. So the objective and goals of a game are what the players aim to achieve to win, right? You have to be working towards something, whether that is getting Mario to the top of the flag, whether that is actually accomplishing building an entire house to survive the night within Minecraft, and so on and so forth. You need to have a goal, an objective in place for your players to actually work towards. And remember, folks, we're not just players today, we're actually game designers. So we have to put ourselves into the shoes of, all right, I'm building this for an audience. I'm building this for the players. How am I going to want them to actually complete my game and play it more? The next principle we have, Corla, is rules and structure. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
So basically every game has rules and structure to it. They define how the game is played. So it's including what players can and cannot do.
Yeah, exactly. And again, folks, this is really detailed, right? So again, you probably could tell at this point, I'm a big Minecraft fan. So this is talking about how your player actually interacts with the world. When I press the spacebar, how high do they jump? When I get hit by an arrow from a skeleton, how much damage do I take? These are all the rules and the structures of the game so that it makes sense. And we have to convey to our players, the people playing our games, what these rules are. Okay? You don't want to exist in a world that you don't understand how it works and what the structures are. So we need to make sure our players know what the objective is and what the goal of the game is and how they're actually going to survive, right, in the world as well. Third of all, folks, we have interactions and play mechanics. Now, there's pillar, looks at how players interact with each other and the game itself. So this is through actions and through movements. This is how we actually have our characters move within the game, how they interact with one another, whether that's being hit or being scoring points. We have to think about, okay, what's the interactions between the sprites and the characters within our game? Right? Fairly self-explanatory. And then last but not least then, we have our scoring and our feedback, Corla.
Yeah, so the scoring and the feedback are how the players know how well they are doing in the game, and it's based on the points or other performance indicators.
Yeah, exactly, right? So this is our feedback. This is telling our player, okay, this is what you're doing correctly.
Yeah.
It's called like a positive feedback loop.
Yeah.
So that, okay, oh, I just scored a goal, or I just picked up a coin, or picked up a ring, and I've got one extra number in the top right-hand corner of my screen. This is telling me that I'm doing something positive. I'm doing the correct thing in my game, right? So that's the feedback loop. But then we also have negative feedback loops in game design as well. So when I get hit by an enemy, I lose a life. So that's teaching me as the player to avoid that.
Yeah.
Okay. These are all things we have to keep in mind when we're designing our game. And that's our 4 key pillars, and we're going to be looking at those in just a moment with an activity. But today is obviously called Sporty Sprites. So let's pull in some sports.
Yeah.
Corla, tell me, what's your favorite sport?
I love Gaelic football.
Okay, so what we're going to do is, and we had this chat before, what we're going to do is we're actually going to apply those principles that we just discussed about game design, something we typically think of for video games. We're actually going to apply those principles to Gaelic football.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've played a good bit of Gaelic football, but in this instance, Corla, I'm going to pretend I've never even heard of it.
Okay.
All right, so first and foremost, what is the objective and what is the goals in Gaelic football?
So the objective of Gaelic football is to score points by kicking it over the bar or in the goal, hand passing the ball to your teammates, and yeah, that's basically it.
So that's what you're actively kind of working towards, exactly. Then we have the rules and structures. So what kind of rules are in place when it comes to Gaelic football?
So some simple rules are like you can't pick the ball up off the ground.
Yeah.
You want to defend, but you have to do it fairly.
Legally.
You can only take 4 steps by hopping the ball or taking a solo, and you can't throw the ball.
Exactly, right? And these are the rules and structures. So in video games, rules and structures tell us how our kind of players interact with the world, and if they kind of go beyond that, they kind of glitch out of it. In real life sports, a lot of the time, rules and structures are actually penalized.
Yeah.
So if you do travel more than 4 steps without hopping or soloing the ball, it's going to be a penalty. If you pick the ball up directly off the ground, that's a penalty also, or a foul, I should say. And possession is going to be handed over to the other team.
Yeah.
Okay. So third of all, we have the interaction and the play mechanics. So talk to me. What does that look like for Gaelic football?
So you can interact by passing the ball to each other, using a hand pass or kicking the ball to each other, and you move strategically across the field as well, to defend or attack.
That's an important one,
Yeah.
I suppose. We think about like the basic ones of the interaction, the play mechanics of passing the ball and the kicks and legally kind of tackling other players.
Yeah.
But also there's the high level mechanics, right? Which is actually where your position, where your player is positioned, where they're standing, that dramatically affects the outcome of the game as well.
Does.
But it's hard to actually see that on the surface level. You have to actually understand the game fairly well to think about positioning. And then last but not least, we have the scoring and feedback. Talk to me. What's that like in Gaelic?
So basically you get 1 point if you kick the ball or hand pass it over the crossbar, and you get 3 points if it goes into the net, which is also like my favorite part of the game.
That's always the best part of it. So that's the scoring and the feedback. Uniquely, I think Gaelic football, in comparison to a lot of other sports, you can actually achieve points in 2 different manners. With obviously points over the bar and scoring a goal as well. Obviously, love the phrase, take your points.
And the goals will come.
So what we're going to do now, folks, is we're going to give you the opportunity to pause and kind of look at your favorite sport in a similar way to how myself and Corla just have done with Gaelic football. So you can see on your screen right now the task at hand. I'll just call it out, and we're going to give you the opportunity to pause and complete this with your class, with the person beside you, or individually also as well. So this is the game design analysis task. We want you to pick your very favorite sport and then analyzing it using the 4 key pillars of game design. We want you to write just a very brief sentence for each pillar. These pillars being objective and goals, rules and structure, interaction and play mechanics, and then finally scoring and feedback. And we've gave a little bit of details of how you can actually do this under each one of those pillars as well. So what we're going to do now, folks, is we're going to pause and give you guys the opportunity to take on this challenge. Let's take a look at today's game. So what you're looking at right now on your screen is just a snip or a screenshot of the code that I've created for the game that we're going to be making today. I've titled it Shooting Points, okay? And it's going to be based on Gaelic football, or it can kind of be a soccer game as well.
Yeah.
Very similar. But what we're going to be doing today, folks, is you're going to be following along in a tutorial with us, completing this game. Now, do you have to base it on Gaelic football? No, you can customize it as we go. However, I want to do a big reminder, folks, to something we mentioned at the start. Game design is all about making it fun, but first and foremost, functional, okay?
Yeah.
So we're gonna make sure the game mechanics work, and then we can do the customization as we go. So this is my game. We'll be sharing it later on at the end of the session as well. You can also go to ak.ms/shootingpoints right now to play it if you'd like. That's going into the Q&A at any point. With that link as well, you'll be able to view my code. So if there's any point during today's tutorial that you're saying, oh, I can't read the text and so on, you can just head on over to ak.ms/shootingpoints and you can actually see the code in action and the game in action as well. So a couple things to look at. Our key coding concepts for today, Corla. We have 3 of them. The first one we have, okay, is something we mentioned earlier on, which is sprites. Okay?
Yeah.
So what exactly is a sprite?
So basically a sprite are the characters and the objects that you see moving around in the game. And they can be players, enemies, or even things like trees and houses.
Excellent.
Okay.
The next core concept, so we have 3 of them. Our second one is then when we get things moving. We don't want them to be so static. These are called animations. So tell us, what is an animation?
So yeah, the animations are a series of pictures that change quickly to make the sprites look like they're moving or doing something. Like a flip book, you might make the corner of your notebook.
Very good. And then last but not least, then we have velocity. Something you might be thinking, velocity, how is that going to be incorporated into code or even game design? That has nothing to do with games. It actually plays a very pivotal part. Tell me, Carla, what is velocity?
So velocity is basically just a fancy word for speed and direction. And in games, it's what makes the sprite move faster or slower or in different directions across the screen.
Yeah, exactly. So essentially, yes, it is just speed. It's instead of going 60 kilometers an hour, it's 60 kilometers an hour going north. Okay? It's just combining both speed and direction. And that's how we're actually going to get our players to move today and use our sprites. And we're also going to incorporate some animations as well. Now, we have a lot of code to cover today, folks. So I would recommend you guys watch my screen. Follow along if you have experience with MakeCode Arcade before. However, if this is your first time, just watch my screen and we'll be giving you guys time to catch up with our code. Speaking of, we're going to be working with arcade.makecode.com. We're going to share that link in the Q&A, so it's always available for you. And you'll also see it in our lower third as we get going and looking at our code. So you'll always have it available there for you. So it's arcade.makecode.com. So that is exactly what we're going to do right now, folks. You'll actually see the link to the website just beneath this as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to open that up. I'm going to open up my browser here just in front of me. And the first thing I'm going to show you guys is the game, okay? So have a quick look at this. So this is Shooting Points, folks. This is what I was sharing with you guys earlier on. And this is what we're going to be aiming to accomplish, okay? So we have a defender. We have a goal, we have a player, and we have a projectile coming from that player. And our enemy and our player is also animated. Now, we are going to be working with MakeCode Arcade, which I have here just on my screen. We're going to be clicking on New Projects. I already have Shooting Points already there, but we're going to be clicking on New Project. If you aren't familiar with MakeCode Arcade, it's completely free. There's no sign up, there's no sign in, and there's a whole range of tutorials you can take part in later on. But first and foremost, I'm going to click New Project. I'm going to call it Shooting Points V2. So it's going to be our second version, okay? And this is going to be, let's say, the coding editor we're going to be working with, all right? On the left-hand side here, folks, if you aren't familiar with MakeCode Arcade, we have our coding simulator. So it kind of looks like a little Game Boy and allows us to actually play our games without having to download it onto any hardware. We have an A button, a B button. We have a couple things just underneath it as well, so we can stop our simulator, refresh it, We can actually go full screen as well. Kind of looks more like a Switch there as well, or a handheld console. And down here in the center, we have all of our coding blocks, or categories, as I should say. And these categories indicate the type of blocks that are contained within them. So we already looked at sprites from earlier on. We know what a sprite is. So this is going to be our players, our enemies, our food, our collectibles, anything that we want to actually move or interact with throughout the game that's not just background art, that is going to be a sprite. We also have controller, game, music, scene. We have so many categories here, folks. But we're going to be going step by step through this tutorial to create a game similar and inspired by Shooting Points. Over here, we have our coding canvas. And this is where we're actually going to be placing our blocks of code. And we actually have a block of code already there. It's on start.
Yeah.
And Cora, this is an event block. Okay? It basically means, and it tells my computer and it tells my arcade simulator there, whenever the game boots up, run the blocks of code that's inside of it. Okay? We call them C-shaped blocks, but you can actually slot blocks inside of it. The first thing we're going to do, folks, is we're going to set the scene. So we're going to have our scene category, and we're actually going to have our background image here as well. I'm going to drag that out. I'm going to place it just there. As you can see, it's all kind of yellow and gray. It doesn't look quite right.
No.
That's because it doesn't have an event block. It doesn't know when to run. So I'm going to need to make sure it snaps in just there. To customize your background image, you click on your gray square and you can draw whatever you'd like here. Right? We have an entire pixel tool, a pixel art tool at our disposal. All right? And we even have an undo button down here as well. Just to take note, our background is 160 pixels wide and 120 pixels up and down. That'll come into play later on. Now, for now, if you guys remember, the big rule of this code is that we're going to make it functional and then we're going to make it fun. So, am I going to spend 10 minutes now creating my pitch? No. We have a whole game to play. So right now, I'm just going to use my fill tool up here in the left and color my entire background green. See all these tools? If you hover over them, it tells you what they can do. An erase tool, a rectangle tool, a circle tool, a marquee tool, and so on. But I've just used the fill tool to paint the entire background green. Okay? I think we're all happy with that. You'll see it update on my simulator, just like that. Now, next thing we need, every game needs a player. So we're going to actually create a sprite for this player. So Corla, where do you think I'm going to get that?
I think you will get that in Sprites.
Exactly, right? So we're going to hop on over to Sprites, and we're going to have this first block of code here. We're going to use this block of code about 3 times today. One for our player, one for our enemy, and one for our goal. And I'm going to just drag that out, and I'm going to place it just here. Now, sprite blocks are also considered variables. Variables in coding essentially is like a box that can contain numbers and strings and data and information. In this instance, it's going to be containing the artwork for my sprite. It basically means that we can reuse it throughout our code and update it and change it and interact with it. Okay? Now, first and foremost, the name is set to my sprite. If you've done coding before, you realize how important it is to name your variables correctly. Now, my sprite doesn't really kind of give enough information on how we can actually use this block. So I'm going to rename that to baller. So that's going to be our footballer. Okay? Now, over here, we have a gray square. This gray square will open up the pixel tool and allow us to actually draw our baller. However, if you've joined and done MakeCode Arcade before, you always click that gray square to draw your player. This time, because we're using animations, we're actually going to leave that square blank. So a bit exciting if you've done a bit of MakeCode before. It's a little bit different to some other tutorials. And over here on the right, we always have to take note of the variable and the sprite's kind. Now, that doesn't come into play until the very end, but obviously it's player. Happy days, I'm happy with that. What we're going to do is we're actually going to have our sprite be represented by an animation. So I can do that by going into Advanced, clicking just down here under Advanced, scroll on down and click Animation. Our first block here says Animate My Sprite. It's going to give us frames, it's going to give us an interval, and it's going to give us the option to loop. I'm going to drag that out. I'm going to place it just underneath the creation of my baller variable. Now, Carly, you can see the black triangle just popped up there. An error message has given.
Doesn't look good.
Doesn't look good. What do you think's gone wrong?
Well, we don't have our sprite called My Sprite anymore.
Exactly. So. It is called baller. So we need to make sure whenever we're actually doing that, folks, and we're talking about our sprites and talking about our player, enemy, and so on, that it always actually refers back to the one we're thinking about and what we want to do with it. So right here it says animate baller, and then we're going to have frames. And that's where we're going to click, okay? And it brings me into my pixel tool here again.
Yeah.
Now, the animate pixel art tool is really cool. Over here, we have all of our frames, okay?
Yeah.
Now, what is a frame in an animation? It's a single picture, and we put them all together to make it look like they're moving. Now, if we had plenty of time for that,
Yeah.
we would develop an unreal animation, right?
Yeah.
However, we're doing a little bit of a live lesson here, and we want you guys to actually follow along with this. So we're going to pull from our gallery instead. Remember, we're going to focus on it being functional, and then we'll introduce the fun later. Not to say that this is fun.
No.
So we're going to go into our gallery, and we see some animations already pre-made for us. What I want is to have my player kind of facing towards the goal, so the top of my screen. So we're going to be looking at the back of our player, and we have one just here that I think represents that part.
Yeah.
Okay. Over here on the right, we have all of our different frames. We can actually test what our animation looks like by hitting play, and you can see it moving just like that. For now, I'm happy with that.
I am too, yeah.
So I'm going to hit done and see where our player lands. And there they are.
Looks good.
Doing a little bit of a little jig in the middle of the screen, as you can see. Okay? Couple more things, folks. First and foremost, we want that to happen all the time continuously. As you can see, baller has just stopped moving right now.
Yeah.
So we have to click on with our loop.
Yeah.
Perfect. Now, a couple more things, folks. What we need to do is we need to have our baller and our sprite to move, right? Move in a couple of different ways. First and foremost, I don't want it standing in the center of our pitch just yet, right? We want it to be back a small bit. So we go into sprites, we drag out set my sprite to position X0, Y0, place it just there. I'm going to get ahead of it and change this to baller because that was going to cause an error for us. And then we have our X and Y position just here, folks, okay? Now, Corla, you're familiar with the X and Y axis, yeah? Perfect. So X and Y axis is our left to right, and it's along the bottom of our screen. Yeah. And then our Y axis is up and down. So that's top to bottom. Now, as you can see, go full screen, we're about his baller at the moment.
He's in the top.
Yeah. Baller right now is in the top left. That's because we set the position to X0 and Y0. Yeah. Now, not to confuse you guys, and we're not even going to dwell on it too much. In game design, our Y axis is flipped.
Okay.
Typically, we should have X, Y down here in the bottom left. Because it's flipped in game design, it's up there. Yeah. Okay? So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag my X axis. I use my slider. I'm going to want it to be halfway. So, I'm going to put that to about, let's say, 80. Okay? Because I want them to be in the middle. Yeah. Now, we see that updated up here. Baller's now at the middle of the top of our screen. We then want to bring it down a small bit. So I'm going to use this slider again. And you can actually see on this little preview, show you guys the little preview, where the two lines cross is where they're going to spawn in. So let's say...
Very handy.
Very handy, yeah. So I'm going to say maybe 90 for baller there, and we'll test it out. Okay. I'm fairly happy where baller's position. We then want baller to move. Yeah. So we looked at the very start that one of the core concepts of today's game is what?
Velocity.
Velocity, which is what? It gives a reminder, Corla?
It's the speed and the direction of where the sprite is going to go.
Exactly. So that's why here we're going to drag out a set my sprite velocity, Vx, Vy. Vx and Vy is just going to say V represents velocity and X is the direction that it's going. Yeah. So we're going to go into baller. And then we're going to test out. We're just going to keep an eye on when we boot up our game, what happens to baller. So I've just refreshed it.
He's gone.
It's just getting out of there. Baller's out of there. So let's customize this, all right? First and foremost, we want to go left to right, okay? Not up and down. So we're going to change our Y variable to 0 because we don't want to change it at all on our Y axis, okay? Now, let's see what happens this time. Okay.
Better.
It's a bit better. It's a bit better. We have baller just exiting stage right as it goes along there. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to add in a rule here. So remember our rules and our structures of that baller actually hits the wall and bounces and comes back. Now, we're going to find that in Sprites. You're probably figuring it out now, folks. Whenever we're moving and wherever we're interacting and telling our sprites to do something, we're going to be finding it in our sprites category. Okay? And we're going to scroll down a small bit until we find a block that will help us. We have set my sprite stay in screen. That could work. But I actually wanted to bounce off the side of the wall. So we're going to go set my sprite to bounce on wall. Change this to baller. Now, check it out. Everything's working correctly.
It's looking good, yeah.
Looking good. Baller's going left and right. Yeah. Ready, getting ready. Okay, perfect. So, folks, what we're going to do is we're going to set you guys a little bit of a timeline. We're going to pause now and let you guys actually catch up with our code. If you're having any issues, please let us know in the Q&A or use hashtag MSDreamSpace because we're keeping an eye on socials as well. And yeah, hopefully you can catch up with our code. Big reminder, folks, what do we think about today, Corla? It's going to be functional over fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to have our fun kind of layered on top of it. So make sure your game's working first before you get to customize all those sprites. We'll do that at the end. We can always come back. So we're going to pause now, folks. Let us know how you're getting on. Okay, folks, excellent. So we're now going to move on. We have our player. It's time to introduce our enemy, or in this case, because we're making a Gaelic game, our defender. Yeah. Okay. So what we're going to do, we're going to just move down a small bit, and we're essentially just going to replicate all the steps we did with our player. Yeah. But we're just going to change one or two small things. So first and foremost, we're creating a new sprite. So we're going into our sprites category, dragging that out and placing it just there, just like we did earlier on. Now, I'm going to rename my variable, all right, my sprite, of course, and we're going to call it defender. Yeah. Okay, our defender. Okay. Then we have over here our of kinds. Big thing we need to think of, folks, is that defender is not who we're working with, right? No. Yeah. It's our enemy. So we're going to do our little drop down, and we're going to click enemy, just like that. Same as our player, we're going to keep that gray square just empty, as we're going to actually create an animation for our enemy, our defender, just like we did with our player. So I'm going to drag that out. I'm going to place it just underneath our creation of our defender sprite. Okay? Getting a little error message, because I need to change it to defender. And then now we do the exact same thing. Click on our gray square, okay? And we're going to swap on over to our gallery. Now, if we go into our gallery, you can actually scroll down. There's so many options here. You even have a little snail there if you wanted, or hermit crab, I should say, as your defender. But for now, we're going to just kind of have a quick look at some of these ones. Is there any other kind of ones on the go here? I think this one kind of looks best. Now, obviously, we want our defender to be facing towards us. So we're going to have a kind of a front-facing one. And we have our frames just over here, okay? We can actually play through it. Now, I'm just going to show you guys how you can actually customize some of these sprites that we get from our gallery. So we go into our blue, and I can actually just color in that green jersey, okay? Now, big thing to remember, if you see up here, Corla, is that once it moves into its second and third frame, magically swaps to a green jersey. So we have to click on all of our frames to customize that jersey color.
Don't want him switching up teams.
Exactly, yeah. Be switching up real fast. Okay, so perfect. So now in the top right hand corner, we can see that the color is blue, all right? And I hit done. Now, we're going to have that on loop, just like we did with our baller as well. We're going to refresh. There you go. They're in the middle of the pitch, okay? Now, just for speed, right? And I give you guys this top tip when it comes to block-based coding within MakeCode. You actually have the ability to duplicate blocks, basically copy and paste them. And that's exactly what we're going to do with the blocks we created from baller earlier on. But this time, we're just going to swap it from talking about baller to defender. So you can right-click on your mouse to bring up your little menu, or you can actually click on your screen and long press to get that little menu up there as well. You click duplicate, and then you have this other block. Bring this down here. But obviously, Corla, what am I going to do?
Change the name.
I'm going to change that to defender. Exactly. Now, as you can see, we don't want defender right on top or in the path of baller just yet. So we're going to change our X slider and bring this back up to maybe, let's say, around 40. Okay? Refresh. Oh, sorry, I changed the wrong one. Did you see what I did wrong there? We had our X variable changed. And I should have changed my Y variable. Definitely did that on purpose. Definitely did that on purpose as a teaching moment. Now, I'm going to change my y variable and bring that up to maybe, let's say 50. Let's see where that is. It's all about trial and error.
Yeah.
I'm fairly happy with where defender is right now.
We're giving baller a chance.
Yeah, we're giving the baller some chance, right? So we're also then going to duplicate our block for velocity. And we're going to have defender in here, changed. We're going to refresh. Now, you can probably see there's an issue, apart from defender going off screen. I'm going to refresh really quickly, but they're perfectly in sync.
Yeah.
Now, how we can actually overcome this is that we're going to change the velocity of our defender, right?
Okay.
So we can actually make our defender, we're going to increase the difficulty and actually bring up the speed from 50 all the way up to maybe around, let's say 80, okay? Just like that. Now we're going to keep that y variable, the vy, right, velocity at 0, because we only want it going left and right.
Yeah.
And then final block I have to duplicate is our bounce block.
Yeah.
So our set baller to bounce on, I'm going to duplicate that, drag that down, and change that to defender. Now the big thing here, folks, is that I use duplicate for those blocks. You could just as easily have gone back into the sprites category and pull them out as well. So that is now a good chunk of our game done. So we have our player going left and right. We also have our defender going left and right. And as you can see, our defender's fitness may be a small bit higher, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to have to rely on skill here to get past it, as they're a little bit faster. So right now, folks, I'm going to pause again, leave as much code as I can on screen, and give you guys the opportunity to create your defender or your enemy of your game. Okay, remember guys, you can customize as much as you want, whether it's hockey or darts or even soccer itself, right?
Yeah.
All right, if you want to follow online. So we're going to pause now and give you guys the opportunity to catch up with our code. Okay, everybody, so we're going to keep it moving as we now introduce our third sprite and our final sprite of today's game, which will be our goal, okay? So I'm going to jump over to sprites once again, drag out set my sprite, place it just underneath here, okay? And I'm going to rename it. Obviously, it's going to be pretty self-explanatory this time. Goal.
The goal, yeah.
So, big thing to note here, folks, is this time we're not going to have our goal animated, right?
Yeah.
Because the code doesn't move too much. However, we are going to change this of kind, okay? Because we've had of player, of enemy, but of player doesn't sit quite right for goal.
Yeah.
So we're going to actually add a new kind, and actually we're going to call that goal as well, okay? Now, what we're going to have to do, folks, we're going to have to draw our goal using our pixel art tool. I'm going to jump in here just to show this off to you. Now, as you can see, we could draw a goal here, but I'm actually going to just jump ahead of it and think about this. This is a 16 by 16 pixel layout.
Yeah.
It is typically used just to showcase characters.
Yeah.
Right? But our goal is quite large, a lot larger than that. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually increase the size of our pixel art canvas. And we do that by coming down here. Just in the bottom left-hand corner, folks, bottom left-hand corner underneath our colors. And you see image width is currently 16 pixels. I'm going to up that to 60 pixels. Okay? So it's going to be nice and wide for us, all right, for our goal. And then we're actually going to increase the size of it just a small bit as well, because we want it to actually be taller than our characters. So we're going to change their Y to 20 pixels. Okay, I'm going to zoom out a small bit. Okay, now, what we're going to do is we're going to use the line tool here, the line tool just here, and we're going to go white. And we're actually going to just draw, and we're going to actually increase the paintbrush size. We're going to quickly just draw a goal, okay? Nothing going to be too fancy, because remember, what's our goal right now? Our goal is to actually make the game functional. Why I'm using the line tool is that maybe I don't have that steady of a hand, which as you guys can already see, I don't. So this actually just gives me a little bit of wriggle room to make a mistake, but it'll always give me that straight line. And then I'm actually going to add some netting with a bit of a smaller paintbrush size. Not going to dwell on it too much. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to work as a placeholder for now. Kind of looks like a bit of a jail cell at the moment. Hopefully it looks more like a goal when I put that across there. Okay, there's our goal. Okay, nice and basic. Remember, it's just pixel art, so it doesn't have to be perfect. But I'm going to hit done. I'm going to actually see how that looks. Okay, and there's our goal.
Yeah.
Right? I'm actually fairly proud of that. So right now the goal is right in the face. It kind of looks like they're playing volleyball and that's the net between them. So we're going to have to change the position of our goal. And we're going to do that just like how we did before. Going into sprites, saying set my sprite position, putting that underneath the creation of our goal. Just actually a little shout out and a reminder to anybody who might be running into this issue. If I went up here and changed my change position block up here, I'm going to get an error, all right?
Yeah.
Cora, can you tell me, why do you think I'm getting an error here? It says set goal to position x0, y0, and then I have down here I have set goal to sprite.
I think it might be because that goal is created after you have set
You
goal.
are spot on, and that's an important coding concept, folks, we have to take into account: sequencing. So right now, because our computer reads from top to bottom here, it gets to this point, it says set goal to position x0, y0. I don't even know what goal is.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure we create goal before we tell it to move it, okay? We're going to have that x coordinate to be 80, right? Just like in the middle of the pitch, just like defender and baller. And we're going to actually increase this y variable just ever so slightly. I don't want it to be exactly on the top top line. And
You want that little space for where the ball goes.
Yeah,
wide.
exactly, yeah. So I'm actually going to maybe customize that a small bit. You can customize this, folks. You can test it out, reload it, see what looks best. Maybe a small bit more. See. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good.
So yeah.
I think that looks pretty good. Okay, folks, we're going to pause now. We're only going to give a shorter period of time for this time, just to create your goal, okay? Or whatever you're kind of shooting your projectile at, or your ball at, or your dart at. It could be a dartboard if you're doing darts, okay? So we're going to give you a moment, folks, just to do that. Remember, this time we're not animating it. We can just click the gray square to create it, and then we're going to set its position to be at the top of our screens. Okay, let us know how you're getting on either in the Q&A or by using hashtag MSStreamSpace. Big shout out and big thank you for everyone who's already posting on that. We've seen those are amazing. Keep them up. Excited to see your end product of your final game. Okay, folks, we're going to pause now and give you guys the opportunity to catch up with us. Okay, everybody, now it's time to introduce our ball into our Gaelic game. How we're going to do this, folks, is we're actually going to have our ball act as a projectile, right? So being fired from our player. Projectiles are like the fireballs Mario shoots, or the arrows you shoot from Steve in Minecraft, okay? They are coming from our player, and they typically can interact with the world around them. And they typically have their own little bit of physics as well. So we're going to be looking at that today with velocity. So how we're going to control this, we don't want this to be automatic. We want to actually have the ability to be able to shoot the projectile. Makes it a lot more engaging for our players. So what I want is, when I press A, I want my player to shoot a ball at the goal, okay? How we're going to do this is we're actually going to find a block in their controller category that says on A button pressed. So I'm going to drag that up. I'm going to place it there. I'm going to reorganize my canvas, just coding canvas, just a small bit to make it a bit more readable. I'm going to place this block over here. Now, important thing to note, folks, about the sequencing of our code, because this is another event block, okay? And the event is when A button is pressed, it doesn't have to slot into on start. Right? On start is basically creating and booting up all our game. On A button is during gameplay. So I can actually press A and something will happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into sprites. We're going to scroll on down until we find a block that refers to projectiles. And you'll actually see projectiles has its very own subheading. Now we have two projectile blocks. Make sure you pick the right one. This second one is creating projectiles that come in off screen. The first one is the one we're looking for, because here it actually refers to from my sprite, and in this case it's going to be from baller. So I'm going to drag that up. I'm going to place it on A button. I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see this. And you will see set projectile. I'm A-okay with it being called projectile. We can just leave it at that. To projectile, and we have our gray square. We can draw our ball here. I'm actually going to look into gallery and see if there's anyone we can actually base it on. I'm not sure if there is a football. But if there's any kind of spherical shape at all, we can recolor it. Work smarter, not harder when it comes to this. And I'm pretty sure, yes. So we have this orb just down here. Now, a bit too much of a mystical orb to be shot from a GAN player.
I don't really have colored football.
Exactly. So what we're going to do is we're going to use white, and we're going to use our fill tool just to recolor this all in, right? But what that has done is it saved me from drawing this entire ball out. And now I can focus using my line tool, just drawing a few black lines across it, okay? Might not be the perfect looking ball, We can customize it and finish it afterwards. I just want a good looking kind of placeholder for the time
Give the
being.
effect, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe throw one more in there. One more in there. Okay. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10, right? For representing the Gaelic ball, right? But it'll do the job for now. Now, the next thing we'll see is that there's going to be a little arrow there signaling there's an issue.
Yeah.
The issue we're facing is that my sprite doesn't exist. We want it to come from baller.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to hit that, and we're going to do what we always do in code. We're going to test it. So right now it says set projectile, the projectile of what looks like kind of like a halfway between a tennis ball and a snooker ball of some sort, from baller with Vx50 and Vy50. So we know that relates to velocity, speed and direction. Now, let me press A, and you'll see this is a very bad footballer if this is where it's going, right? Now, that's not where we want it to go. We want it to go up the screen, so we're going to change Vx to 0, because we don't want it to move left and right. Okay, it's a perfect day, there's no wind. And the Vy, okay, we want it to actually go upwards, okay? And if you remember, we flipped our y-axis, so it's going to be a little bit tricky, but if you want to just follow along and even test this out, if I put in 100 there, that's the speed of our ball, and press A, I should say, you'll see it's coming behind me. Now, if I turn that into a negative number, okay, and we're using our critical thinking skills, if 100 positively was going behind me, minus 100 is going to go in front of my player. As you can see, I can now shoot my ball.
Looks good.
Right? So, right now we've created our projectile. Yeah. It's able to come from our player, just like this, right? But nothing's happening when it hits the goal, nothing's happening when it hits the defender, and so on. So, we're going to give you guys a little bit of opportunity to catch up with us now, okay? And then the next time we come back, we're going to be essentially finishing off the functionality of our game. And we're going to have some time to be creative with it. Let us know how you're getting on in the Q&A or with hashtag MSDreamspace. We're looking forward to seeing what kind of projectiles you guys can create. Okay, folks, brilliant. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to build in the rules of our game. And what I mean by that is we're actually going to create a little piece of code and program what happens when our football interacts with our defender and when our football interacts with our goal. Now, before we do this, let's have a think about what we want to achieve with it. We're going to follow kind of like a classic retro style game here, and we're going to have lives. And we're also going to have a score. I think personally, having our defender interact with the ball, so we misclick and it hits the defender, we should lose a life. Because it's turning over possession. And then if our projectile hits the goal, we should get a score. Okay? We can make it far more in depth if we had a lot more time. We could have 3 points for a certain goal and so on and so forth. But for now, folks, we're going to keep it pretty simple because we're just wanting to make a functional game first, and we can build off that foundation. So what we're looking for here, folks, we're looking for a block that allow us to create a piece of code or have something happen when 2 sprites overlap with each other. Now, again, we're talking about sprites here. So we're going to go into our sprite category. If I scroll on down in my sprite category, you will find there's a whole section or subheading called overlaps. Now, some of these are saying my sprite overlaps with other sprite in a diamond block or my sprite kind and so on. What we're looking for is we actually want the event block that can be found in this category that says on sprite of kind player overlaps other sprite of kind player. So we have to do a little bit of rejigging here to make sure that reads the correct way we want. So we want on sprite of kind, and we can use our drop down arrow. Remember the folks, that little arrow means we have more options of projectile. So when our ball overlaps other sprite of kind, and this is going to be enemy, okay? Because we can actually scroll on over here and check it again. This is the block we made our defender with, okay? And it's of kind enemy. If you're running into issues, I know a lot of students sometimes run into issues of kinds. Make sure you go back and check when you created your sprite, was it of the correct of kind? So I'm going to say other sprite of kind enemy, okay? Now, what we want to happen is we want us to get minus a score, minus a point. So we go into info for all blocks related to scores, countdowns, and also lives, okay? So we're going to say change score by 1. No, actually, do you know what? We're doing lives, aren't we? Yeah. Sorry, I got mixed up there. We're going to say change life by -1, okay? Zoom in a small bit so you guys can see it. Change life by -1. I'm going to drag that out. I'm going to place it just there. Now, you might be saying to yourself, change life by -1. We don't even have a life to begin with, right? But let's test it out, all right? Let's see what happens. I'm going to see if I can hit him. it's instantly game over.
Yeah.
Okay? Because a couple of things are happening there. First and foremost, we haven't given the number of lives to our player. And secondly, when the ball hits the player, that ball is interacting with the defender for a very long time. So we need to introduce another block of code there in just a second. So what we're going to do is we're going to give ourselves some life, reinvigorate ourselves with some more life. Go into info, and we have our life subheading. We're going to say set life to 3. I'm actually going to set life to 3 when? At the very start of the game. So I drag that up here, and I'm actually going to do that even before we set our background image. I'm going to give my player lives. You'll see the UI, right? So the user interface of our game has changed up. Yeah. Our HUD up here now includes 3 hearts. Okay, but let's test this out. I'm still dying instantly. Okay, I'm still getting a game over instantly because it's removing all my lives. That's because we haven't told our ball to disappear the second it removes a life. So we're actually going to use our destroy block. So our destroy block, very melodramatic over the top, can be found in our sprites category under effects. We actually want it to happen before our life gets -1. And this is going to be the tricky thing, right? So make sure you kind of lock in for this one, folks. We're actually not going to put in here projectile, okay? That's because it will destroy all projectiles in the field, the ones not even interacting with our defender at the time. We actually need this block up here, okay? So you'll see sometimes we have blocks within blocks, blockception essentially happening, right? So we're going to drag out on sprite of here, right? And you see it stays in top, and it'll actually replace this one here. Now, what that is doing, folks, is that it is destroying just that one ball that's hitting the defender at that time. So we test it out. Let's see. There you go.
Oh, perfect.
All right?
Yeah.
So it's only taken 1 life from us. Perfect.
There we go.
Okay, great stuff. Now, what we're going to do, folks, is we're actually going to do a little bit of speed up here, a little bit of trick of the trade, a little cheat code. We're going to do our duplicate just like we did last time.
Yeah.
I'm going to hit right click. I'm going to hit duplicate. Drag this down here. Okay. But we're going to change a couple things. I'm getting all this yellow and gray because this block already exists.
Yeah.
But let's update it. Instead of kind enemy, let's say of kind goal. What happens when our ball interacts with our goal?
Yeah.
Okay. We also want our ball to get destroyed because we don't want it just to phase through.
Yeah.
It's not the most powerful shot ever where it blows out the net. We want it to also disappear or be destroyed the second it interacts with our goal.
Yeah.
So, but we don't want it to remove a life because that would be pretty hard.
No, yeah.
We want it to give us a score.
Point,
yeah, exactly. So we're going to say change score by 1. We're going to have to remember now to actually include set score to 0 on our on start, similar to over here. We go for the info, drag out set score to 0. I'm going to place it just there. I'm going to refresh. And you'll see now, okay, the ball. Oh, the issue here is that it's actually this block. I'm going to have to drag this down again. Okay, see? There you go. So
don't make sure you don't forget.
Yeah, it's because I did the cheat code. That's why it was punishing me. All right. So I'm just going to show you guys that one more time. Remember, folks, you're going to have to do it twice for each one of these. You're going to drag out the block that's in the event block, the C-shaped block, and we're going to put it inside our destroy block. Okay. Hope that makes sense for everybody. And that, folks, is going to bring us to essentially the end of our game because right now we can score points and we can also lose lives.
Yes.
We're going to have to maybe include a little bit more of an incentive for players to play well. And we're actually going to do that by adding a little bit of a time incentive, right?
Ooh.
So we go into info and we're going to drag in start countdown, right? So how long do you think a game of shooting points would last for?
Maybe a minute.
Yeah. Let's say start countdown. We're going to say 60 seconds. Okay. I'm going to refresh. And I can shoot points just like this. Okay. Great stuff.
Yes.
Okay, folks. So that's our game complete. There's definitely things we can add to it, such as going into music and adding a ding sound every time we get a point, right? Or we can also add maybe
the other way.
Yeah, the other way. Was it ding back? It's going to be a power down sound maybe for when we lose a point. Okay, so let's see what this. No.
You have them on the wrong way around.
Do I have them? Oh, I do have them on the wrong way around. Oh, of course. Well, that'd be very, very depressing to get a power down sound for every goal you score. All right. Okay. Cool. So that is all of our code, folks. I'm going to zoom out here and then go full screen. And that's our game complete, okay? We're going to pause now, give you a few minutes to catch up with this. I might actually just zoom in on this one, just so you guys can see it. All right, that's our main piece for this one. Let us know how you're getting on, either in the Q&A or by hashtag MSDreamspace. We want to get everyone over the line. In a few minutes, I'm actually going to pop up something super cool. You guys can actually have your games played live on air here with us here in Dreamspace by sending it to our arcade kiosk. I'll show you guys how to do that in just a moment. Hopefully everyone now can use those overlap blocks to create the rules of giving yourself points and actually taking away lives. We're going to do just a quick refresh on everything we covered during our shooting points game and today's live event also. So what did we cover? We looked at what game design is, what it means to be a game designer. You're that author, you're that artist, all combined into one. You're then looking at, okay, the rules and the structure, and we even apply those to our favorite sports. Right? I love some of the suggestions that came in when I kind of applied that to darts and hockey and so on. We did it with Gaelic football. We then moved on, folks, to actually creating our very own arcade game based on Gaelic football. Some of you guys created some amazing ones, whether it was other sports or even a fish versus a dog, which is a great one. And we loved seeing them. And we covered so much today, folks. So I just want to say a massive thank you for joining us for this Dreamspace Live. We're going to be posting the link to our game either in the description of this video or in the Q&A if you're still joining us live. We have so much more Dreamspace Lives coming up, so be sure to stick around to see our next in our series. And for me, Michael, thank you so much for joining us. Corla, thank you so much for joining me as well.
Thank you so much for having me.
So folks, we'll catch you during the next Dreamspace Live. Bye.
Bye.